Hey everyone, I'm TeamFightTonka. I'm a Set 3 Masters player. We're currently Plat 4 in Set 4, and we're still climbing. This puts me well within the top percentage of players right now, so I thought I would share some information about how items work. Over the last week, I've been answering a bunch of questions from friends who are new to TFT, and it made me realize there are nuances that all new players might not know about the items. With this video, I want to try to push you to open your item pools to some items and close them off to others. If you like this series and this type of content, please like and subscribe, and I'll continue working through the item list. I stream on Twitch throughout the week at the link right above my face, so stick around and let's get to it. What a quality title card. So the first item I want to go over is Rapid Fire Cannon, or RFC. It's made from 2 recurve bows. The most important part of this item is that your attacks will never miss, so anyone holding the Rapid Fire Cannon is essentially immune to blinds, they're immune to dodge chance from other champions, or things that would otherwise impair your hit rate. If that champion fires an auto attack, it will connect to a target. The other thing to note is that any champion with a range of 660 or higher, if they're placed in either of the far corners of the map, they will never move on their own, with the exception of being across from another champion with rapid fire cannon. So that makes it so that this item pairs extremely well with a defensive item like QSS or Trap Claw. If you can surround a carry in a corner with a bunch of tanks, no one should ever be able to get to them. So the next item I want to go over is Thornmail. It's made from 2 chain vests, and surprisingly, or I guess unsurprisingly, with the addition of Gargoyle Stoneplate and Sunfire Cape, a lot of people seem to be sleeping on this item. But it's arguably the most important item when you're versing an assassin comp or a crit heavy lobby. It's something that I will always build if I see 2 to 3 strong players leaning on crit. So people who are stacking Infinity Edges, Last Whispers, Jins, or just going all assassins. The big takeaway from this item is that Thornmail straight up negates all crit damage. So this applies to bonus damage done from abilities dealing crit damage as well. So things like 6 Assassin Akali or a Warlord Katarina, their abilities that would do extra crit damage just do the base damage. This is exceptionally good against Jin because, as you know, his 4th shot will always crit, and you're basically only going to be taking base damage at that point. So next is Deathblade, which is made from 2 BF swords. So outside of the famous Bonky Kong, this item is pretty awful. It's barely a good item. In the last set, there were a lot of champions who could use it, but outside of very certain situations and comps, you almost never want to go this item because there are better items you can build with your BF swords. If you do find yourself in a position where you're just going to force this item, I'd recommend that you build it with Hurricane, because each bolt of a Hurricane will count as an assist if that champion dies who is hit by the Hurricane bolt. So it's a pretty quick way to stack it up. I think it's realistically the only efficient way you can use this item and justify throwing away 2 BF swords. But it would be my recommendation to almost never build this item. So next I want to go over Dragonclaw. It's made up of 2 Negatron cloaks, and I think this is another item that's being slept on a lot because it's been pretty bad since the nerfs in Season 1, or Set 1 actually. But I've actually had a lot of success with this item, and it single-handedly won me some lobbies with how much magic damage is flying around this set. It's probably my favorite counter to a Katarina. As you know, most of the core items on Katarina are QSS and Gunblade, so you can't really Zephyr her. It's pretty hard to get around her. But stacking a tank properly and aligning up with Katarina with a Dragon's Claw, most tanks can just take the entire brunt of her ult while your carries take her out. So it's definitely something I'd recommend trying if you don't seem to have an answer to an out-of-control Katarina. So the next item I want to talk about is new to Set 4. It's made up of a belt and a chain vest, and it is the Sunfire Cape. This is hands down the best item in 10.19. I will slam it 100% of the time on a 2-star frontliner. It gives insane stats, and it just has such great utility for frontliners. because of how drawn out the early and mid fights are, it means that a strong tank can do a crazy amount of damage just by not dying. If they just stay there and survive, they're going to bleed out a lot of the opponent. That topped with the damage mitigation or the healing mitigation it provides, there's no reason to not build this item. You can slam it all the time. And then the biggest part about it that really snowballs you is that even times when you're going to lose a match, no matter what, this item usually makes it so that you don't lose a crazy amount of HP. I'm rarely aced in a round with a Sunfire Cape. I will take out at least 1 or 2 people with it. It feels a bit overtuned. It's not quite broken, maybe, but I would go ahead and build this every single round for success. So Frozen Heart is a tier and a chain vest. If you've played regular League, it works basically the same way. But a really important thing that new players and all players should really understand about TFT is that attack speed basically determines mana gain, right? So if a unit's got permanently slowed attacks, they are going to cast significantly less spells than anyone else in the lobby. So good placement of this item can actually just win streak you through the entire early game when there's so few units on the board and people basically follow the same placement structures. This item it's insane. I would recommend building it whenever you have extra tiers and chain vests. I know chain vest is pretty contested for other hot items, but Frozen Heart is just amazing. So I want to quickly talk about Frozen Heart and Sunfire Cape together, because along with being really good items on most tanks, these two items work extremely well on high mobile units. So I'm sure you've been slaughtered by Dusk Rivens just hopping around and applying Sunfire Cape, being an unkillable monster to your team. But it's also really good on characters like Lee Sin or Set, and also most assassins. Because of the aura nature of the items, there's a high chance to apply their effects to backline units that you could normally never get their effects on. This is especially true of Frozen Heart, because if you remember from the last slide, attack speed determines mana gain. So if you can slow down these sharpshooters or basically any long range backliner, you're really just cutting down their spell, their ability to cast, and that could be enough to turn most fights. So last thing I want to go over, which is probably the question I get asked most by the people I play with, is when do you choose to make Sojin versus blue buff? So for those of you who don't know, Sojin is made with a sword and a tier, and blue buff is made with 2 tiers. They're both mana regenerating items. So the general rule of thumb is that if an ability costs 70 or more mana, then you should probably take Sojin instead of blue buff. So there are some caveats to that where you want to be mindful that Enlightened trait increases the amount of mana a champion gains. So there are instances when a blue buff is actually better than Sojin on a champion, mainly on 6 Enlightened. The other thing to keep in mind is that champions like Warwick or anyone who has sort of one and done ability, you don't want to waste a mana regenerating item on them. And yeah, one last tip, if you want to win streak all the way through the early game, you just throw a blue buff on Janna with 2 to 4 Enlightened, and that should basically buy you a win streak until Wolves, as long as you can keep that Janna alive. So again, here are all the items that we went over today. If you have any items you want, or you want more details on certain items, let me know in some comments below, and I can definitely sort that out and see what we can get going for the next video. Thanks for sticking around, thanks for watching, and take care.